What's happening, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more Gyllene Tider, and we're returning to the 1981 album Modern Times. Thank you again to Gebus. And I did notice both in the folder and on the Discogs master release, there's a section with a lot of songs that is apparently the album proper, and then there's like a second section with fewer songs, like 5 or 6, something like that, that is apparently like either an EP that's thrown on, or at least like it's separated. So I do wonder about that. Again, we're a few songs away before we get to that transition point, but given that it's both in the folder and on the Discogs master release for the album, it did make me curious. In any case, the track here is, I want to make sure I have the first name right because it's not one I'm familiar with. Yeah, Povel Ramel, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, Paul McCartney and Jag. So Paul McCartney, I don't think he needs any further introduction, but yes, obviously one of the most famous musicians and songwriters and a member of the Beatles. Jag, I'm wondering if that is Mick Jagger. Of course, Jag could be something else, but it seems like that's a real possibility. Povel Ramel is not a name I'm familiar with, but given the other company here, I'm guessing he's a musician, a singer. So, yes, ultimately, and in fact, it might not be a he, but I'm going to go with that because Pavel, which I know might not be the same name, but that is typically a male name. So, in any case, yes, I wonder if this is another series of references and or inspirations that Pear and the rest of Gyllene Tider are paying homage to. So, that would be my assumption, but obviously I look forward to any insights people will have because, again, outside of maybe some random English phrases, I don't expect this to be, or rather, I do expect it to be primarily in Swedish. So let's give it a listen. This is Gyllene Tider from Modern Times, and the song is Povel Ramel, Paul McCartney, and Jag.
Pröjsa våra tankar. Fyll på och så Povel, det är din tur. Och dessutom har du råd. Fyll på och så Povel. Pengar har jag allt, men du måste förstå att jag tar det ganska kallt. Det är praxis, jag kan inte slänga pengar utan advokatråd. Är det så det ligger till, så Povel, bjuder jag gärna på drinken. Listen, så på spelar de inte Lindeboms senaste hit. Du förstår, fortsätter på. Det är bara skriverier. Jag tjänar inte mer än försvarets furirer. Och försvaret går ju under, så det är nog bäst jag håller på mitt. Trodde du var rikast ibland oss. Jaså, sa Paul, men mynt inget mått på rikedom. Jaså, sa Paul, men det hjälper väl till. Nej, sa Paul, man blir lätt imbecill. Och man tror att pengar hjälper. Visst gör de det. Lägga ut för mig för maten. Paul, sa Povel, du har väl 1000 eurocards, eller åtminstone ett. Povel, sa Paul, mitt eurocard är tomt. Mitt MasterCharge American Express är också tomt. Mina barn har köpt Ferraris och Linda köper pälsar i ett. Lägg av, sa Povel, snart kan du väl köpa hela världen. Lägg av, sa Paul, vad ska jag med en värld som snart är väck? Lägg av, sa Paul, du kan ju spela schack med Elton John Cleese i kubbhatt och frack. Okej, sa Paul, och satte sig och skrev ut en check.
Okay, first and foremost, and I have many things to say here, but do we get a John Cleese reference there? I believe there was a John Cleese reference there, which again, early 80s. It could, of course, be a Monty Python reference or a Faulty Towers reference or just a, large figure in the world of comedy reference. But yeah, it sounded like that's what was happening there. I actually don't know if we heard the title phrase in there with the three names in sequence. Maybe it was in there and I just didn't catch it as such. But I thought I was going to clearly hear Paul McCartney, and I don't know if I did. So yeah, maybe I just missed it. But either way, we also got reference to MasterCharge, which I believe is the earlier name for the credit card type / company MasterCard, and American Express, which I definitely wasn't expecting, so that was a bit of comedy, and I wonder the context. Is it making a point about commercialization of music? Is it making a point about putting a bunch of charges on your credit card because you're trying to go see different concerts, and you're taking plane flights and booking hotel rooms and so on? I feel like there could be any manner of meaning there, but it's definitely a reference that surprised me in the moment. So yeah, they do continue the trend of most of the song being in Swedish, but a few key phrases and or names that are more from the English speaking world showing up, which is really interesting to me. I was already going to comment on the backing organ chords. From the very beginning right to the end, there were these long backing organ chords which had a bit of a church organ sound, but I wasn't expecting the lead pipe organ style melody, which again, it was short each time it came around, just a little bit of a flourish, but it definitely was louder and more in the front of the track, and was a really nice flare up that I wasn't expecting. So yeah, there were layered organs in this track, which I very much enjoyed. And it, again, I know people have been commenting, it does seem like their use of keyboards after the initial phase where it was a bit more, let's say, straight away rock and roll, is a very enjoyable and prominent feature by this point. So yeah, that definitely stood out. But yes, also the flourishes, and indeed those lead organ lines came at the end of a measure break or the beginning of a new measure, when right before there's a drum flourish and a real swelling of the sonics dropping in, and then that organ line would come in. So I also enjoyed Pear's vocals. A couple places it seemed like he was playing with the rhythm a bit, stretching or bending a word so that it wasn't exactly where you expect it to be rhythmically, but then zooming out, it's the passage was still perfectly in time, if that makes sense. And of course, there's a couple moments along the way where he gets a bit raspier, which I very much enjoy. So yeah, cool vocals, really great organ / keyboard work, and definitely a tune that has me curious about what's happening lyrically. So yeah, do let me know. Once again, thank you to Gebus. I did want to mention this time around, it's just going to be one of the trilogy of Marie, Gyllene Tider, and Roxette. But then when we come back next fortnight, I'm going to do a double of at least one of them. So we'll get back to that. Do bear with me. In any case, let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Peace.